Hello everyone, Bandy Bono here, and we are looking at the first question in the treatise on creation. Today we're starting a brand new treatise. If you missed the introduction to this treatise, you can look for the last video posted before this one. I did an introduction to treatise on creation, on the angels, and on the work of the 6 days. We kind of broke down all of these different subcategories or what have you inside of these treatises. So today we're in the first one. Treatise on Creation is going to take questions 44 to 49, and our first subcategory here is the production of creatures from 44 to 46. And you can see, kind of looking at the titles here, that we are talking about where do creatures come from, what's their relationship to God as the first cause, all that sort of good stuff. All right, so this first one, we'll cover in its entirety, only 4 articles here. The procession of creatures from God and of the first cause of all things. 4 articles here. First one, whether it is necessary that every being be created by God. All right, which we would think so based on what we've seen so far, but let's check it out. A few objections. Number 1, a thing can exist without anything except what belongs to its essence. So in other words, a thing, all that something needs for existence is its essence. That goes back to, we've talked about substance versus accident. I could exist without brown hair, I could exist with brown eyes if I, had them. Those things are accidental to me. They don't pertain to the essence of who I am. The cause of a thing is non-essential since beings can be understood without understanding their cause. Therefore, some beings might not be created by God. So the basic argument here, that the cause of a thing does not pertain to its essence, therefore a thing can exist without, regardless of their cause, and therefore it's possible that the cause might not be God. Necessary things do not require an efficient cause, and there are many necessary things besides God that are in existence, and whatever has a cause can be demonstrated by that cause, and mathematics are not demonstrated by an efficient cause. But Romans 11:36, the verse it says, of him and by him and in him are all things. That becomes our argument from authority. All right, argument here. Whatever is in anything by participation must be caused in it. Okay? So whatever anything has by means of participation, not by self-subsisting in itself, but by participating in something else, must be caused in it. To just give another example beyond what Aquinas is going to talk about, we all participate in humanity. Humanity does not subsist in us. We participate in it, so our humanity is caused in us by something else. Okay, and what Aquinas is going to argue here is that that also is the case for existence itself. Why? Because only God is a self-subsisting being. Only God has existence without participation. Everything else exists through participation in God's self-subsisting existence. Therefore, all things have been through participation in God, and God is the cause of everything. Objections answered. Number 1, things can be understood without considering their existence, but still, it is still the cause of all things, that all things are being by participation. So even though we might be able to understand something without considering existence, it's still a fact that their existence, if they're not a self-subsisting being, which only God is caused in them by participation. Aristotle tells us that some necessary things still have causes. So within it's possible to have a necessary thing without a cause, that would be God, but it's also possible to have necessary things with causes. That would be everything but God that has participation of being in God's self-subsisting being. And in the case of mathematics, mathematics treats its objects in the abstract, which is why we don't consider their efficient cause. All right, number 2 is primary matter, matter without form, created by God. Objections. Number 1, whatever is made by is composed of subject and something else. Primary matter has no subject. Number 2 is an interesting one. Action and passion are opposite matters of division. God is the first active principle, while matter, primary matter, is the first passive principle. Why do we say that God is active and matter is passive. Just a little refresher there. We say that matter is passive, primary matter is passive because it is pure potency. It is matter without form, so every bit of primary matter is pure potential, whereas God, there is no potential. We saw that in the treatise on the one God, that God, by definition, must be pure act. Therefore, God and matter are two equal principles divided, neither of which is caused from the other. And then primary matter is, as we just said, pure potential, therefore it is against its nature to be a made thing. So some interesting arguments there. But Augustine puts the creation of primary matter on the same level as the creation of the angels. He kind of describes them as kind of on that level of creation. So it does call it a created thing. All right, our argument. Whatever is the cause of beings is the cause of things. And this includes things without substance or matter. In other words, things without primary matter. Thus, primary matter is created by God because it is a thing, not just a being. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward, but let's come back to the objections because there are some interesting ones there. All right, number one, objection one considers becoming in the sense of taking a form. So in the sense of taking a form, a thing requires subject and something else. And in that sense, we would say, okay, primary matter is not created. However, it is created in the sense that it emanates from the universal principle of being, which again is God, the first being, the first principle. Number two, passion is actually an effect of action. Therefore, the first passive principle is the effect of the first active one. So they're not just co-equals. The first active principle is going to come first. Matter is not created without form, but there's still potency in what is created. In other words, so primary matter, as we would say, all matter exists with a form, but there's still this sense of primary matter within a form that carries potency for later development. So I have kids, obviously in 20 years, they're not going to look the same they are now. Their matter has potency for growth in any number of ways. Okay. Whether the exemplar cause is anything besides God, and we'll understand as we get into the objections what he means by the exemplar cause. Number one, effects are like their exemplar cause. Creatures are far from being like God. Therefore, God is not their exemplar cause. These next three are really kind of the same thing in the same way, and they give us a good example of or a good explanation of what an exemplar cause is. Whatever exists by participation in species, right? That's the example I gave a minute ago, that we all have our humanity for participation in the species of human. Therefore, there are self-existing species which are called exemplars. So the objections, these next three are basically going to be saying that the species of humanity is the exemplar cause for you and me, okay? And that is an abstract, self-subsisting thing that causes our humanity in us, which, if you're playing along at home, is Platonism. Okay, so this article is going to become a debate between Platonic realism and Aristotelian realism. Platonic realism, with its idea of forms, is going to say that there is this kind of self-subsisting humanity that is the form of humanity. And I know I'm simplifying Platonism here, so I apologize. But it's a form of humanity that we all participate in. Aristotelianism is going to say the form of humanity is only knowable to us by looking at humans. It doesn't exist apart from humans. So yes, there is such a thing as the species of humanity, but it's only known through humans. There isn't some ideal form of humanity that exists apart from humans. All right. So, continuing on with that, science considers species, not particular things. Therefore, species don't exist in singular things and are not exemplars, or are exemplar. The species, the exemplars. Dionysius says self-subsisting being is before self-subsisting life. All right, exemplars are the same as ideas. Augustine says that ideas are in the divine intelligence. Therefore, God is the only exemplar cause. Go way back to question 15 where we talked about the divine ideas, or the divine idea, and we'll refresh our memory of that in just a second. Okay, an exemplar is necessary in order that an effect receives a determinate form. Okay? If you didn't have, you need the exemplar of humanity in order to be a human. That's how it works. question 15 showed that all ideas, all exemplars, are really in God. Though, of course, because God is one, we would have to more accurately say that there is only one idea that is in God, and that one divine idea is then multiplied through the relation to creatures. Yet, so all exemplars, all forms, the form of humanity, the form of your dog, the form of anything, ultimately relates back to the divine idea, to God. So God's essence, where the divine idea is the ultimate exemplar of everything. And replies to our objections. Number 1, creatures do not have the same species as God, but they attain a likeness to him as they represent the divine idea. So there is a likeness between creature and exemplar, even there. Number 2, a man without matter is impossible. This is the refutation of Platonism with Aristotelian realism. Therefore, while an individual man belongs to a species of man, there is not a self-subsisting species of man. Right? That's what we were just talking about. Number 3, this is caused by there being a difference between how we think about things and how they are. So when we study things, we might think about the species of man, humanity, in the abstract, but yet, according to Aquinas' Aristotelian scheme, that abstract thing isn't actually a self-subsisting thing that exists apart from humanity. All right, and then number 4, by self-subsisting being, Dionysius means God. Finally, is God the final cause of all things? 4 objections. Here, to act for an end implies a need of an end. God does not need an end, therefore he does not act for one and is not a final cause. The efficient cause and final cause cannot be identical, according to Aristotle. We already proved God is the efficient cause of everything, back in Article 1. All things desire their end, not all things desire God. That's an important objection, one that's fairly easy to answer, but a very important one. Number 4, if God is the efficient and final cause, there would be before and after in him, since the final cause precedes the efficient cause. And as we've seen many, many times, there is no before or after in God. But Proverbs 16:4 says that God has made all things for himself, which implies that he is the final cause of all. All right. The first agent, God, acts only to communicate his perfection. All creatures seek their perfection, which is only found in God's goodness. Therefore, divine goodness is the end of all things. So basically what it's saying is that by being the efficient God, God acts his desires to communicate his perfection. All creatures are seeking their perfection, which is found in God's goodness. So because that is what all creatures are naturally seeking, that is their final end, God is the final cause of all things. All right? Objections answered. Only imperfect agents act from need, therefore God gives without need because he is a perfect agent and is the final cause without need. So objection 1 would only be true of an imperfect agent. It's not true of God. Number 2, this is not a case where the form of the thing generated is in the likeness of the form of the generator. So going back to when we were just talking about exemplar causes, because that's the case, that's how we get around objection 2. Number 3, the important one, all things desire God as their end, even if they do not realize it is God they are seeking. That would be an important point, of course, of Christian theology and Christian philosophy, right? God is the end of everything, but because we are fallen, sinful, what have you, we may not realize that it is God that we are seeking, and we may actually seek out sinful things as that end, even though God is the true thing that we are seeking. All right, number 4, the sense of before and after is only in how we think of God. Yeah, we've seen that many, many times before. All right, so not too difficult a one. This was definitely a little easier so far from the last 40 some odd questions. And so next one, question 45, is 8 articles long, so we'll do that in 2 pieces, and I'll be back in a few days with the first half of that one. Until then, I'm Benny Bono. I'll talk to you later. And goodbye, everyone.